Amidst the bustling streets, in the endless streams of vehicles, have you ever felt like you were just a tiny fragment in the swirling current of life? Modern life brings too many sounds, lights, and layers of responsibility. But in the midst of all that busyness, have you ever paused just to listen to a sigh within your chest? Someone once likened life to a fast forwarded film, each frame passing by in haste, so that when we finally stop, all we see is a vague emptiness. Not everyone among us knows what we are living for. We wake up, go to work, eat, drink, and interact like pre programmed machines. And so, the years pass by, while our souls become increasingly withered. Yet there are also quiet moments when night falls, when the noise subsides, something inside gently stirs. We suddenly ask ourselves what we are living for. It is no longer a rational question, but a whisper from the depths of our being. That is the most precious moment for a person when they begin to turn inward. In the serene gaze of the inner self, we recognize that all the gains and losses, the worries, and the things we once considered important do not actually bring much peace. A woman who once lived among skyscrapers, endless meetings, racing each day for success, said, I have everything, but my heart is empty. It wasn't until one early morning, when the dawn shone through a small window, that she suddenly realized happiness could lie in something simple: a breath, a ray of sunlight, a pause. Perhaps we too need such a moment, a time to truly stop, to listen to what our heart is yearning for, the sorrows, the wounds, even the forgotten dreams. They are all still there, waiting for us to return. The ancients taught, when the mind is at peace, all is at peace. But how can the mind be at peace if every day we are pulled along by the ringing of phones, endless deadlines, and expectations? Sometimes it is our very weariness, our very failures, that are the subtle reminders of the universe, telling us that we are forgetting ourselves. The Buddha once taught, it is not the external world that causes us suffering, but the way our mind receives the world. A flower blooming in the city or in the forest is still a flower. The question is whether the observer is quiet enough to perceive its fragrance. If the mind is still disturbed, then no matter where we are, there is no peace. But if the mind is calm, then even in the marketplace, it can be a meditation hall. Practicing at home does not mean withdrawing from life, but living amidst the world while the heart remains at peace. That is an art of living, experiencing life while nurturing awareness. There is no need to leave your job, no need to become a monk. Just start by learning how to listen to yourself. And listening is not done with the ears, but with the heart, with a silence deep enough for the echoes of consciousness to resound. When we listen in this way, we begin to sense something very light, very real, the whisper of wisdom, of compassion, of our own pure mind. That is also when we begin the journey home. There is a miracle that always exists in the quietest moments of life. It is when the mind is no longer dominated by external circumstances and we begin to hear the subtle sound within ourselves. These sounds are not clear voices, but vague yet profound feelings, a gentle echo from the depths of consciousness where every pain, every hope, every dream is still imprinted. In the flow of life, There are times when exhaustion makes us want to give up, when pressures pile up, when stumbles follow one after another, making the heart wither like a flower in the desert. But if we can pause, if we are willing to listen deeply, we will realize that even in the arid desert, it is still possible to find a pure drop of dew. That drop of dew is the silent teaching of the Buddha, gentle, profound, and powerful enough to revive an exhausted soul. There is no need to memorize many sutras, no need to travel far to find a master. Begin with the breath, with stillness, with gratitude for life. That is already the first step of the practice. Every compassionate word, every kind thought, every sincere action is a step back to oneself. And once we truly return, everything becomes clear. Someone once asked, if I live an ordinary life, taking care of my family, working for a living, can I still practice? The answer is yes. Practice is not only for the monastery. Practice is being mindful in every moment, whether washing dishes, cleaning, working, or raising children. When our mind is fully present in every action, every word, every thought, that is practice. A meditator once shared that in the early days of learning meditation, he always felt uncomfortable with the silence. His mind was like a wild horse, always wanting to run forward, unable to sit still even for a moment. But after many times returning to the breath, he began to see the miracle. Silence was no longer frightening, but became a refuge. From then on, he heard gentle calls from within, things he had never noticed before. Listening to yourself is not escaping society, nor is it sinking into isolation. Listening to yourself is accepting even the imperfect parts of yourself, seeing clearly the wounds, anger, jealousy, not to judge or punish, but to understand and transform. When we face ourselves with compassion, even suffering seems to soften, becoming easier to embrace. And then we begin to yearn to understand more about the teachings of the enlightened, ones not to memorize, but to live them. Every verse of the scriptures becomes like a cool breeze blowing through a parched soul. Every word of the Buddha, like the morning sun shining through the thick fog of afflictions. And then we realize those teachings have never been far from life. They are always there, waiting for us to be quiet enough to recognize them. Practicing at home is like that, living amidst life, but not being swept away, meditating in the city, keeping the heart pure amidst the chaos, taking a deep breath among countless worries without losing oneself. When we can live like that, every step on the path of life is also a step on the path of enlightenment. There is a beautiful image in Buddhist teachings. The mind is like a garden. Every thought is a seed. Every action is how we water it. If we sow in that garden seeds of kindness, such as compassion, mindfulness, and gratitude, the garden will bloom with peace. But if we give up and let the weeds of anger, greed, and ignorance grow, the garden will become desolate, thorny, harming ourselves and those around us. It is truly difficult to keep the mind always pure in a world full of changes, but it is precisely in that difficulty that the path of practice becomes precious. No one can bear our karma for us. No one can live for us, just as no one can breathe for us. Therefore, each person needs to learn how to tend the garden of their own mind, careful in every thought, every word, every action. There is a story about a poor farmer who lived kindly and often helped others, even though he himself had little. One day, he saw a small bird fall from its nest in the rain. He brought it home and cared for it with all he had. A few years later, when there was a bad harvest and famine, a flock of birds came from somewhere, leading him to a golden rice field he had never known. That was not a miracle, but the fruit of the good seed he had once sown with a small act. Likewise, every kind thought in the mind quietly guides us to better things. It may not be seen right away, may not be easy to recognize, but it is always present, like an underground stream nourishing the lifeblood beneath the earth. On the other hand, there are also sad stories. A powerful, wealthy person whose soul is full of calculation, envy. He lives in a grand house, but is always restless, afraid of loss, always suspicious of others, and in the end dies alone with no loved ones. That is proof that even with everything, if the mind is not kind, life will never be truly fulfilled. Practice is not to become someone extraordinary, but to become oneself, but a cleaner, gentler, wiser version. And there is no need to wait until life teaches us a harsh lesson to begin. We can start right now with a small act, a kind thought, a silent moment to return. When we begin to plant good seeds in the mind, transformation will gradually occur without too much effort or expectation of results. Just tend the garden with mindfulness and compassion, and one day we will see the fragrance of compassion spreading very naturally, like the peaceful breath of life itself. That is the essence of the path of home practice. Not noisy, not dazzling, but quiet like a cool morning dew, gentle, yet enough to awaken a withered soul. One of the most profound things the Buddha ever taught is that the mind leads all things. That saying seems simple, but it opens up an immense truth. All happiness or suffering in this life begins with the mind. The mind is the root, the source of all thoughts, feelings, and actions. When the mind is pure, words will be gentle, actions will be kind. But when the mind is clouded by anger, greed, or delusion, even the smallest things can cause deep harm. That is why practice is not about changing external circumstances, but transforming from within. A meditator once compared his mind to a lake. In the early days of meditation, the lake was always stirred by countless emotions: sadness, anger, worry, fear. He found it hard to sit still, but day by day, with each breath, he patiently returned to himself, and the lake began to settle. Under the clear water, he saw more clearly the true nature of himself, a pure soul only obscured by the dust of life. Likewise, everyone among us has the capacity for clarity and compassion. They have never been lost, only covered by layers of afflictions. Practice is gradually wiping away that dust so that the light from the mind can shine again, not to become someone else, but to return to oneself, a self full of understanding and love. Someone once asked, "How do I know if my mind is pure or defiled?" The answer is very gentle. Look at your first thought when you encounter a problem. Your first reaction when someone offends you, and your first action when facing a difficult choice. The true mind always appears in those moments when there is no time to calculate. Therefore, home practice is not something distant. Every day of living, every word, every look, every step, if placed in mindfulness, are all deep practices. When cooking a meal for your loved ones with gratitude, that is practice. When folding clothes with respect, that is practice. When listening to another with your whole heart, without judgment, without interrupting, that is also practice. Sometimes we think we have to do something grand, memorize many sutras to be practicing, but in reality, the small things done with kindness are the most enduring roots. A sincere smile, a gentle look, a kind word may not change the world, but will soothe much suffering. And if each person starts with themselves, starts with a little quiet each day, the world will be much gentler. Because when our mind is peaceful, we no longer cause storms for others. When our mind knows love, we no longer hurt others. And that is the greatest gift a home practitioner can give to life. Home practice is not a distant ideal, nor is it the choice of those who lack the conditions to become monastics. On the contrary, it is an honest, practical, and profound path where people learn to live mindfully amidst everyday life, to practice among the most ordinary things, because it is in this very life that we can practice patience when our children trouble us. It is in this very life that we can learn compassion when facing those who hurt us. And it is in this very life that we can cultivate mindfulness when doing repetitive tasks every day. Every small act is an opportunity to practice, if we know how, to return. The Buddha did not teach us to leave life, to find the truth. He simply taught us to awaken, and awakening can begin anywhere, in the kitchen, on the way to work, or even when washing a dish. When the mind abides in the present, every action becomes sacred. It is no longer just a task, but an expression of wisdom and compassion. Someone once shared that he began to change his life with something very small. Every morning before leaving the house, he paused for 30 seconds to smile and silently give thanks for something. Just that. But after a few months, he found himself calmer, less irritable, and felt lighter even when facing adversity. That is the power of practice in daily life. No need for display, no need for formality, but deep and transformative at the root. Sometimes we think we need to do something grand to call it practice, but the truth is, just one conscious breath, one less reaction in anger, a moment of pausing to listen to yourself, and you have already begun to transform. The human mind is like the earth after rain. Some areas are soft and easy to sow seeds, but some are hard and dry. If we are not patient in tilling, not diligent in watering, how can we expect flowers to bloom and fruit to ripen? Home practice is like that, being patient with yourself day by day, watering the heart with kindness day by day, lighting the lamp of mindfulness in the moments easiest to forget. And then one day, when we no longer try to practice, but every word, thought, and action arises naturally from compassion and wisdom, then we are truly walking firmly on the path the Buddha once taught in this life, amidst the city, among people as real and fragile as ourselves. There is a question that many home practitioners often carry in their hearts. How not to be swept away in the busyness of life when caring for family, work, children, and society. Is there still any space to truly return to oneself? In fact, it is in the busiest moments that we have the best opportunity to practice, because amidst worries, if we can still maintain a peaceful breath, a compassionate look, that is the most genuine practice. There is no need to wait for life to be quiet, for life is never truly quiet. But we can learn to keep our mind calm amidst the noise. A mother once shared that during the years of raising young children, she always felt she had no time for herself. In the morning, preparing meals; at noon, housework; at night, soothing her child to sleep. But one day, she decided to change her perspective. Instead of wishing for free time to practice, she began to see caring for her child as practice. When feeding her child, she focused entirely on that action. When soothing her child to sleep, she paid attention to every breath, every heartbeat of her child. And she said she had never felt so peaceful in her heart. That is the spirit of practicing amidst life, not waiting for favorable circumstances, but using the present situation as soil to sow seeds of compassion and awareness, not trying to escape life, but looking straight at it, to understand, to love, to transform. And each time we succeed in something small like that, a bit of affliction in the mind is untangled, a bit of light is lit. Practice is not about accumulating more, but gradually removing the layers of dust on the mind, the dust of rivalry, envy, blame, craving. When those layers of dust settle, we will see the true mind appearing, clear, open, and very gentle. And it is from that place in the mind that our words become gentler, our gaze deeper, our presence more complete. There is no need to declare that we are practicing, yet those around us will still feel the peace radiating out. That is the quality of someone living mindfully amidst life. Practice is not about what we do, but how we are present. Some people do good all their lives, but still complain, are angry, and suffer. Others do nothing grand, but live with tolerance, honesty, and quietness. The latter, though not calling themselves monks, can still be deep practitioners. And so can you, no matter how complicated your current life may be. No matter how much pressure you are under, remember that just a minute returning to your breath, to yourself, means you have entered the path of awareness. No one can walk it for you, but as long as you begin, everything will gradually transform, like a lotus slowly opening in the mud, not hurried, not forced, but true and unstoppable. And then one day, when you look back on your life, perhaps in a quiet afternoon or a restless night, you will realize that the most precious thing you have ever kept is not money, fame, or outward achievement, but the serenity in your heart, the moments you have lived true to yourself, not pretending, not forcing yourself to become someone else. Then you will remember the simple moments, once sitting quietly by the window, watching the rain fall, once silently with a cup of hot tea, or a morning doing nothing at all, just breathing and smiling. Moments that, without practice, you would pass by thinking they were meaningless, but in fact, they are the silent doors leading inward, the thread connecting you to the deepest peace. There is a small village where people live harmoniously without competition or envy. In that village, there was a poor man named An, without family or possessions, but everyone loved him. He did not preach or teach doctrine, but everyone who met him felt at ease because he lived with kindness, with stillness, and with sincerity present in every action. People often saw him wake up early to sweep the small road. No one asked him, but he did it regularly for many years. Every gentle breeze passing through the clean alley was a quiet presence of his. He helped others not out of obligation or for fame, but simply out of compassion. And then one day, he left this world quietly, just as he had lived. But afterward, the villagers kept telling stories about him, like a lotus blooming quietly in the mud, not flaunting, not showing off, just spreading fragrance. People like Anne do not need to preach because their life is itself a sermon, and you can be like that too. No need to become someone special, no need to try to prove anything. Just live. Truly, be fully present in every little thing. That is the truest path of practice. The Buddha once said, "No one can save us but ourselves." That teaching is not to make us feel lonely, but to remind us that within each person is the strength to overcome suffering without dependence, without searching outside, just by returning within. Everyone is on their own journey. Some must learn to let go. Some must learn to love. Some must learn to pause. But we all share the same destination, unconditional peace, which does not come from what we possess, but from whether we are still attached to them. And when you understand that, when you truly begin to live that way, you will find that life becomes as light as mist, even though you still have worries, still have burdens, still have moments of fatigue. But deep inside, there is a place always quiet and steady, like an autumn lake, place no one can disturb, no circumstance can take away. That is the most sacred part of you, and it is always ready to welcome you home.